The ambulance's headlights barely cut through the Montana blizzard. Twin beams lost in a curtain of white, Autumn, Riley gripped the steering wheel as the vehicle groaned around a bend. The wipers fighting a losing battle against the snow. Then she saw it, a dark figure standing squarely in their path. "Mason, look." A German shepherd stood motionless in the road, its black and tan coat rimmed with frost. It didn't bark, didn't flinch from the glaring headlights. It simply watched them, eyes reflecting an eerie intelligence. "Move, boy," Mason called through. The window, the dog stepped back, then stopped. A soft whine escaped its throat as if asking to be followed. Something about its stillness sent a chill through Autumn that had nothing to do with the storm. This wasn't a stray. This was purpose. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Red Elk, Montana had always been defined by its relationship with wilderness. Nestled against the Swan Mountains, the scattered settlement of barely 2,000 souls knew how to endure winter's grip, but this storm was different. Ancient and angry, screaming through pine forests and burying roads beneath 4 feet of snow. Power lines were down in 3 neighborhoods, and emergency services had rerouted most calls to a dispatch hub 60 miles away. Autumn Riley was 33, lean and wiry, with sunken cheeks and a permanent exhaustion etched into her features. Her skin bore the faint rosiness of old cold burns, and her hazel eyes rarely rested on any one thing too long, as if her mind distrusted stillness. She had once been radiant, family said before the avalanche, before her brother Noah vanished under a wall of white, leaving behind only silence and Autumn's guilt. These days she wore her trauma-like armor, practical parka, sturdy boots, and a tone clipped just short of harsh. The Sterling County Medical Service patch on her sleeve was frayed at the edges. 5 years as a paramedic in Red Elk had taught her that emergencies out here carried a different weight. When help was an hour away in good weather, minutes mattered more. Beside her, in the ambulance cab, Mason Sawyer muttered into the dispatch radio. At 41, he had the round shoulders of a former athlete and the watchful eyes of a man who'd seen too much. Salt and pepper curls peeked from beneath his beanie, and his voice carried the low, steady timbre that had talked down countless panicked patients. He had a teenage daughter in Missoula and hummed old country tunes under his breath when nervous. If Autumn was the storm, Mason was the hearth, always steady, always warm. "No follow-up yet?" he said, frowning. Call came from somewhere near Greystone. Hollow. Dispatcher couldn't get a return, just coordinates. Autumn didn't respond. She hated vague calls. They whispered of things half-finished, hikers who never came back, frozen loners, people who didn't want to be found. She hated them most of all in the snow. The ambulance rounded another bend, passing between thick pine groves. The radio crackled. With static, then fell silent. Outside the world had narrowed to a tunnel of white mountains and sky erased by the blizzard's fury. And there, in the middle of that white void, stood the German shepherd, watching them with an intensity that felt almost human. Autumn eased the ambulance to a full stop, the headlights catching the swirling snowflakes around the German shepherd. Its ears were high alert, eyes focused with unsettling determination. "Just a stray," Mason muttered. "We need to keep moving." But something in the dog's stance made Autumn reach for the door handle. "Give me a minute. Are you serious?" It's 20 below with the wind chill. She stepped out anyway, the cold slapping her hard. Wind bit through her jacket, forcing her to squint as she moved slowly toward the animal. The dog retreated, not bolting, but deliberately stepping back. Then it stopped, tail low but not tucked, watching her, another step forward. Another retreat from the dog. "Mason," she called over her shoulder. "Grab a flashlight." Mason groaned but followed, beams sweeping between trees as they stepped off the road down a gentle slope of pristine powder. The shepherd didn't gallop or dart away. It paused often, turning to check they were still following, leading them deeper into the silent forest. $10 says, "This much taking us to a dead rabbit," Mason said. But the joke fell flat in the frozen air. Autumn didn't laugh. The dog moved with purpose, not panic. Its deliberate path struck her as oddly familiar, like search patterns she'd learned years ago in mountain rescue training. The dog stopped at a small clearing where the snow had sloped inward unnaturally. It circled something half-buried, letting out a low, urgent whine. Autumn approached, narrowing her eyes at what looked like a pile of old winter clothes crusted over with snow. Then something metallic caught the light. A carabiner. No, a snap. The edge of a baby carrier. She dropped to her knees. "Mason, help me." Together they began digging. The snow was packed hard, crusted over. Autumn's fingers went numb fast, but she clawed until fabric gave way. A flash of pink, then a small hand. "Jesus," Mason choked. Autumn tore open the bundle. Inside, wrapped in what looked like an old army jacket, was a newborn. Her lips were tinged blue, but her chest rose just barely. "She's alive!" Autumn gasped. "Mason, get the pediatric kit now." As Mason sprinted back too, the ambulance, Autumn shed her jacket and wrapped it around the infant's tiny body. Her breath trembled as she held the child against her chest, trying to share her warmth. The wind shrieked like it was trying to take the girl back. The shepherd sat quietly now, 10 feet away, watching. "Who are you?" Autumn whispered, not to the baby but to the dog. It didn't respond, but there was something in its stillness that sent another chill through her. Something almost sacred. Mason returned with gear and oxygen. "We warm her slowly," he said, voice tight with urgency. "Controlled, no shock." They worked in practiced unison, wrapping heat packs in towels, positioning them around, not directly against the baby's torso. Autumn slipped a tiny oxygen mask over the infant's face while Mason took vitals. "Core tongue dangerously low, but she's fighting," he said, eyes on the portable monitor. "How long was she out here?" "Too long," Autumn replied, her mind racing through frostbite protocols. The baby's extremities were cold, but not frozen solid, a hopeful sign. As they prepared to move her, Autumn noticed something on the infant's wrist. A hospital bracelet partially obscured by frost. She brushed it clean. "June," she read aloud. "Her name is June." They bundled the baby and made for the ambulance. Autumn never taking her eyes off the child. She held her like something the world had tried to erase but failed. Back on the road, she glanced through the windshield, expecting to see the German shepherd. It was gone. No tracks, no sound, as if it had never been there. "Floor it," Mason said, already on the radio. "We need to get to Ellen's clinic in Greystone Hollow, it's closest." The storm showed no signs of relenting. By the time they reached the small medical outpost, the ambulance had developed a coating of hard rime along its sides. The windows steamed from within, fogging the narrow corridor where Autumn sat hunched, still clutching the tiny form wrapped in her parka. June stirred once during the journey. No sound, just the faintest movement. A butterfly's breath beneath layers of warmth and wool. Inside the clinic, the heater buzzed like a tired engine. The place was small, rural, kept alive by underfunding. And volunteers who believed medicine was a calling, not a career. Dr. Ellen Wexley was already at the door when they burst in. She was a tall, spare woman of about 60 with crow's feet that looked etched by worry and graying curls pulled into a stern bun. Her frame was all bone and sharpness, but her voice, when she spoke, had a softness that cut through chaos. "Get her." "In here now," Ellen said, motioning them toward the exam room. "Third infant in 2 months," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. "And this one brought in by a ghost." Autumn laid June down gently on the warming bed. "We don't know how long she was out there. No ID, no signs of anyone else nearby." "She was buried in the trees under the snow," Mason added. "A German shepherd led us to her." Ellen's eyes narrowed. "A shepherd?" Autumn nodded. "One that didn't flinch from a moving ambulance, one that waited." Dr. Wexley said nothing more. She moved like a woman born to triage, clean, deliberate, precise. The baby's temperature was dangerously low, but not beyond hope. Autumn assisted silently, her hands steady, even as her heart thudded from the aftershock of what they'd found. When June was finally stabilized in a heated bassinet, Autumn stepped out into the hallway. peeled off her gloves, and leaned against the wall. Her mind replayed the sound of the dog's breath in the snow, that faint whine like it had been pleading, not for itself, for the child. Casey, she looked up. A man in a long green parka with snow crusted into his beard was approaching. His name tag read Deputy Colin Barrett, mid-30s, broad-shouldered. He had the kind of jaw that looked like it had been broken and healed wrong, and eyes that stayed cautious even when his voice was calm. "I'm with the county," he said. "Got a report." "From dispatch." "No missing child filed? No incident matching what you found? Any tracks?" "No," Autumn replied. "Just the dog. No footprints, no tire marks, like the snow buried everything." Colin frowned. "That's the third weird rescue call this winter." "You heard about the kid that turned up outside the ranger station in Bozeman?" said a snow dog brought him. No one could confirm anything. "Same kind of dog?" Autumn asked, her interest piqued. Colin shrugged. No one saw it. "But if it is the same one, sounds like you met a myth." Autumn wasn't interested in stories. She was interested in facts. "What about the mother?" "We have to notify." "Child Services, I've already contacted them," Colin said. "And we're cross-referencing local hospitals for recent births." But unless someone reports her missing, he let the silence finish the sentence. Autumn walked back to the exam room. June, clean now, was no longer blue. Her skin had taken on a pale pink glow. Her eyes fluttered beneath closed lids. Dr. Wexley placed a gentle hand on Autumn's shoulder. "You were right on time." Any later, she didn't need to finish. Autumn knew the statistics on cold weather exposure for infants. Minutes, not hours, made the difference. Later that night, Autumn sat alone in her truck, the storm finally beginning to ease. She held her phone in her lap, staring at the photo she'd taken. Mason had insisted on it, the place in the snow where they'd found June, the baby carrier half buried, her jacket thrown across it. The tracks already filling with fresh snow, and in the corner, faint, but there, the shepherd's silhouette just before it vanished into the treon. She opened the local community page, posted the photo with a caption. "Found near Greystone Hollow. German Shepherd led us to this child. Does anyone recognize this dog?" She didn't expect much, but within an hour, her inbox buzzed. Messages poured in. "That looks like the one I saw outside the old sawmill. Is that the shepherd from the Monroe Bridge sighting? My grandma swears that dog shows up every time there's an accident near the gorge." One reply stood out. "He's not a stray. His name's Scout. Used to be a search and rescue K9. Lost his handler in the 2019 Ridge Fire. No one's seen him since." The name hit Autumn like a breath held too long. She clicked on the profile. The message came from a woman named Ivy Lang Late. 40s, retired wildlife responder. Her profile photo showed her with a badge and a rescued owl on her shoulder. Her hair was steel gray, braided back, her eyes the color of lichen. Autumn messaged back instantly. Ivy responded within minutes. They talked for hours about the fire, about the handler named Ethan Blackwood, about the dog who'd vanished after the funeral. Scout had been trained in wilderness recovery. Ivy swore he understood not just commands, but intention, emotion. He loved babies. Ivy had said he used to nuzzle them like he was afraid to breathe too loud near them. By the time Autumn finally closed her phone, it was past 3 a.m. She looked outside. The wind had slowed. The town slept under its shroud of white. In the distance, beyond the frost-covered windshield, she thought she saw movement between the trees. But when she opened the door and stepped out, there was nothing, only silence and snow. Morning in Red Elk came not with light, but with quiet. The kind of silence that follows storms, as if the land were catching its breath. The snow had settled like an undisturbed sheet over the town, smooth and glistening under a slate sky. Pine branches hung heavy with ice. Roofs bowed under soft drifts, and the roads remained ghostly white, untouched by tire or boot. Autumn Riley stood in the hallway of the clinic, a coffee cooling in her gloved hands, her eyes fixed on the nursery room window where June lay sleeping, her tiny body rising and falling beneath a cocoon of blankets. The baby had stabilized overnight, her vitals strong enough to halt further transfer. They would wait. Dr. Wexley insisted, for Child Protective Services to arrive. But Autumn wasn't waiting, not really. Her body remained in the building, her soul still halfway back in those woods. Her mind wandered not to the snow or even the child, but to the German shepherd, to the moment he vanished. She hadn't dreamt it. That dog had been real, and someone had known his name. "Scout," she murmured. The voice behind her made her flinch. "I saw the post," said Ivy Lang. Autumn turned. Ivy stood just beyond the doorway, brushing snow from her long wool coat. In person, she looked just as her photo had suggested, tall, wiry, weathered like driftwood. Her gray braid fell over one shoulder, and her boots were laced tight, muddy from the trail. Her presence had the quiet steadiness of someone who had been through fire, literal and otherwise, and come out leaner. Sharper, but not bitter. "You?" "Really came," Autumn said. "I don't sleep much when old ghosts come calling," Ivy replied. They shook hands, though Ivy's grasp was more of a knowing touch than a greeting. "I need to know everything," Autumn said. They took their seats in the break room beside a half-frozen window pane and a table covered in cold coffee and granola bars. Ivy's voice, when she spoke, was even and low. "Scout was assigned to Ethan Blackwood," she began. "Firefighter 28. Bright kid. Scout wasn't just his partner, he was his shadow. They worked the ridge fire 3 years ago. Wind changed too fast. Ethan saved 2 hikers, got them clear, but a beam collapsed before he could escape. The other crew pulled his body out, but Scout, he never left the scene." "You mean he stayed behind?" Autumn asked. Ivy nodded. "Wouldn't let them take the body. Had to sedate him just to remove him from the ridge. After Ethan's funeral, Scout was placed with a temporary handler. But 3 days later he took off in the middle of the night. We searched, nothing, and no one's seen him since. Rumors that he was spotted near the fire line, near accident sites, even sleeping under school porches. Never aggressive, never letting anyone close." She paused. "Until now, why now?" Autumn asked. "I think," Ivy said gently, "he was waiting for a moment that mattered. And when it came, he remembered what he was trained for." Autumn exhaled slowly, her thoughts beginning to click together, not like puzzle pieces, but like something long buried finally rising to the surface. She thought about the baby, how perfectly timed everything had been. She remembered how Scout had stepped back slowly, waiting for her to follow. Not panicked, not frantic, but patient, like a dog who had done this before. A nurse poked her head into the break room. "Autumn, Mason's looking for you. Says it's important." She found Mason in the hospital corridor, his face unnaturally pale. "What's wrong?" she asked. "That dog," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I know him." "You know Scout?" Mason nodded, his eyes distant. "I didn't recognize him last night in the snow, but seeing that photo you posted..." He pulled out his phone, showing a picture from years ago, a group of firefighters smiling in front of a red engine. And there, sitting proudly beside a young man, with a broad smile, was Scout, younger coat shinier, but unmistakable. "You were a firefighter?" Autumn asked, surprise evident in her voice. 5 years, worked with Ethan Blackwood on the Sterling County crew. I left after the Ridge fire. Mason's hands shook slightly as he put away his phone. Autumn had never seen him like this. In 3 years of working together, he'd been the steady one, the rock. Now he looked haunted. "I was the one who told him to go in," Mason said, the words spilling out like a confession. "The hikers were trapped. Ethan wanted to try a different approach. I said there wasn't time." The weight of his words hung between them. Autumn reached out, touching his arm lightly. "You couldn't have known the wind would shift. But I should have listened to him. He knew those mountains better than any of us." Mason's voice cracked. "I couldn't face it afterward. Transferred to the medical service. Never told anyone here about before." Autumn processed this revelation, seeing her partner in an entirely new light. All this time, he'd carried this burden silently, just as she carried the memory of her brother. "So when the call came in last night near the ridge," she began. "I almost couldn't go back there," he admitted, "but duty is duty. Never imagined I'd see Scout again." Ivy had joined them, quietly standing in the doorway. "Scout." Would have recognized you, she said to Mason, even after all this time. Then why lead us specifically? Autumn asked. Why not someone else? Dogs like scout form attachments based on trust and shared purpose, Ivy explained. If he led you too, there was a reason. The hospital doors slid open, letting in a gust of cold air and Deputy Barrett, now accompanied by a tall woman in a crisp pantsuit. Her silver hair was pinned in a nonsense twist, thick red glasses perched on her nose. This is LeVar Winslow from Child Protective Services, Colin explained. She's here about June, Laura nodded briskly, clutching a leather portfolio. Where is the infant? This way, Dr. Wexley said, appearing from her office. She's stable, responsive, a fighter. As they walked toward the nursery, Autumn hung back, her mind racing with connections she couldn't quite piece together. A dog that disappeared 3 years ago suddenly reappearing to save a baby. Mason's connection to Ethan, the ridge fire that changed so many lives. I need to see the site again, she said suddenly to Ivy and Mason. Where we found her, Colin overheard. I'll come with you. Need to document everything anyway. An hour later they stood at the clearing again. Casey, Ivy, Mason, and Colin made their way back to the exact patch where June had been found. The snow here was shallower now, patches of dry earth peeking through in places. The carrier was gone, retrieved by evidence texts. But the imprint remained, a hollowed depression like a memory pressed into the land. Ivy knelt beside the imprint. Her fingers grazed the ground. He brought her here intentionally. She said it's too protected. He dug it down, made a pocket, insulated. Her. Do you think Autumn began he found her or that he saw it happen? They didn't answer, but a new voice did. Maybe both. The speaker was a man in his late 40s, wrapped in a shearling coat with patches along the sleeves and a worn scarf slung over his shoulder. His face was sun-chapped, his beard untrimmed, and his boots looked military. He had the lean stiffness of someone used to long walks and longer silences. I'm Samuel Wickses, he said, adjusting his gloves. I live about 2 miles north. I trap and log out here. Saw your post. Thought I should come. Have you seen the dog? Colin asked. Not recently, Samuel replied. But 2 nights ago I heard something. Not coyotes, something bigger. Thought it might be the cat, but then I saw the prints. Huge, deeper in the snow than a coyote or even a wolf. And you followed them? Ivy asked. Didn't need to. They followed me. Dog was tracking me for a good mile. Never showed himself, but I saw the trail. Autumn's pulse quickened. Where did it lead? Samuel looked at her, back to the ridge. Always back to the fire line. Mason turned away at these words, his face tight. With emotion. The old ones from the Blackfoot tribe have stories, Samuel continued, his voice dropping lower. They say when someone dies with unfinished business, sometimes they leave behind a guardian, a protector to complete what they started. You can't be suggesting, Colin began skeptically. I'm not suggesting anything, Samuel interrupted. I'm just telling you what they believe. And I've been in these mountains 40 years, seen things that don't always fit neat explanations. Autumn remained silent, her eyes on the depression in the snow. She wasn't one for ghost stories or mysticism, but she also couldn't deny the precision of Scout's actions, finding the baby, digging her a shelter, leading help directly to her. We should check the ridge, she said finally. If Scout keeps returning there might be a reason. I'll take you, Samuel offered. Know the quickest route. As they prepared to leave, Mason hesitated. I can't, he said quietly to Autumn. Not ready to go back there yet. I understand, she replied. Stay with June, we'll be back soon. Autumn followed Samuel with Ivy and Colin close behind. They hiked in silence, breath fogging in front of them, each step drawing them closer to the charred remains of the fire zone. They passed the ghost of a fire tower, its base scorched and skeletal. Ivy stopped, knelt by a blackened trunk. Here, she whispered. Paw prints, large, singular, pressed into the frost in a perfect line, and beside them fainter, almost misted prints of a second kind, small, like a child's. Autumn knelt. These aren't new. Snow falls too light here, sheltered by the trees. Ivy murmured, they could be days old. What does it mean? Cullen asked, his skepticism giving way to genuine curiosity. Ivy stood slowly. He was here before, with June. Before the road, before you found them. Autumn blinked. He dragged her through the woods? No, Ivy said, her voice low. He carried her. They moved forward, following the paw prints through the trees. After 10 minutes, they reached a clearing. In the center stood the remains of a fire circle, old ash half buried under snow, a scorched photo frame lying crooked in the dirt. Inside it, though damp and curled, was a picture of a young man in firefighting gear, one arm slung around a German shepherd. The smile on his face was wide, earnest, unguarded. Autumn lifted the frame. Ethan Blackwood, she said, recognizing him from Mason's photo. He brought her back to where he lost him, Ivy said, like an offering or a promise kept. Behind them, a branch snapped. They turned. Scout stood at the edge of the clearing, silent as ever, watching. He looked older up close. His coat was rough with thorns and burrs. His eyes clouded faintly with age, but his posture held the discipline of training long burned into muscle. He didn't growl, he didn't run. Autumn took a slow step forward. Scout, she said. He blinked. Ah, you found her, she whispered. You stayed with her. She knelt. Scout stepped forward. He didn't go to Ivy. He didn't go to Samuel or Colin. He went to the picture frame in Autumn's hand and gently rested his nose on it. Then he lay down in the snow. The moment held a weight that none of them dared break. Colin, who had been recording the scene with his phone, slowly lowered it. Even he seemed to recognize the sanctity of what they were witnessing. I've never seen anything like it, Samuel murmured. Autumn reached out, her hand hovering inches from Scout's head. The dog watched her, then slowly, deliberately moved forward. To meet her touch, his fur was coarse, matted in places. He had lived rough these past years. Come back with us, she said softly. Scout rose to his feet, shook off the snow, and stood waiting. There was no leash, no command, but when they turned to leave, he followed, not like a pet, but like a colleague rejoining a mission. The return journey to the clinic was made in near silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Scout walked beside Autumn, never straying more than a few feet from her side. Occasionally his ears would prick at some distant sound, but his focus never wavered. As they approached the clinic, Autumn saw Mason standing outside, pacing in the parking lot. When he spotted them and Scout, he froze. My God, he whispered. As they drew closer, it really is him. Scout stopped, staring at Mason with an intensity that made the air between them feel charged. For a moment, Autumn feared the dog might growl or retreat. Instead, Scout slowly approached, sniffed Mason's extended hand, and sat at his feet, Mason's eyes filled with tears. Hey, old friend, he said, voice breaking. It's been a long time. He knelt, and Scout pressed his forehead against Mason's chest. A gesture so deliberate, so full of forgiveness that Autumn had to look away. This was a reunion that transcended words. Inside the clinic, Dr. Wexley was speaking with Lavra Winslow when they entered. Both women fell silent at the sight of Scout. Is that? Dr. Wexley began. Yes, Ivy confirmed. This is Scout? Lavra adjusted her glasses. I'm sorry, but is that dog cleared to be in a medical facility? He saved June's life, Autumn said firmly. He's cleaner than most of us, and he's not leaving. Something in her tone borked no argument. Laura pressed her lips together, but didn't pursue it. Speaking of June, Dr. Wexley interjected, we've traced a pediatric visit. Baby June Monroe, born 7 weeks ago in Missoula. No father listed. Mother's name is Kelsey Monroe. Autumn felt her heart quicken. Has she been located? She filed a missing child report 2 days ago, Laura explained. Said she'd left the baby with a friend for the afternoon. Came home to an empty crib. No signs of forced entry. The sitter's car was gone. Her name's Trish Warren, Dr. Wexley added. Mason, who had been stroking Scout's head, looked up sharply. Wait, Warren. That the woman they found in the wreck on Highway 2, Laura nodded. Car hit black ice, went off the road. She was ejected deceased at the scene. What about June? Autumn asked, voice barely holding steady. Restraint seat wasn't in the vehicle, Laura continued. Troopers think it was thrown during the crash. They found stroller wheel marks leading downhill. Far from the wreck. Must have rolled before the snow buried it, Mason swore under his breath. Autumn exchanged a look with Ivy, pieces falling into place. So, no one left her in the woods on purpose, Colin concluded. No, Laura said, tone softening. But no one found her either, except the dog. Scout had moved to the door of the nursery, sitting at attention, eyes fixed on the room where June lay. His posture was unmistakable, protective, vigilant. He knows she's here, Ivy observed. He's still guarding her. Dr. Wexley hesitated, then made a decision. Let him see her. They opened the door. Scout entered with careful steps, approaching the bassinet where June slept. He sniffed once, then sat beside her, his body angled between the crib and the door, a sentry taking up his post. The mother is on her way, Laura said. Should be here by evening if the roads stay clear. As the afternoon wore on, the clinic fell into a strange, peaceful rhythm. Scout remained by June's side, occasionally resting his head on the edge of the bassinet when he thought no one was watching. Dr. Wexley checked the baby regularly, each time acknowledging Scout with a respectful nod. Even Laura seemed to accept his presence, though she documented everything meticulously in her reports. Autumn sat in the corner of the room watching. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was witnessing something profound. A circle closing, a promise fulfilled. Mason joined her, offering a cup of fresh coffee. You know what's weird? He said, quietly. Back when we worked together, Ethan used to talk about his cousin from Missoula. Young girl named Kelsey said she was expecting a baby. Autumn nearly spilled her coffee. Kelsey Monroe is Ethan's cousin. Mason nodded slowly. I hadn't made the connection until just now. Been a lot of years, a lot of names in this job. So Scout didn't just find any baby, Autumn whispered. He found Ethan's family. The revelation settled over them like a blanket. Outside, the sky had begun to darken again, clouds gathering for another round of snow. The clinic lights seemed to glow warmer in response. My daddy used to say, there are no coincidences in the mountains, Samuel commented from the doorway. Just stories we haven't learned to read yet. By early evening, Scout had finally dozed off, his large frame curled protectively beside June's bassinet. Autumn watched his sides rise and fall, wondering how many nights he'd spent alone in the wilderness, waiting for purpose to find him again. A commotion at the clinic entrance drew their attention. Voices in the hallway, hurried footsteps. Then a young woman burst into the reception area, her blonde hair disheveled, eyes wild with hope and fear. My baby, she gasped. They said you found my June. Kelsey Monroe was young, maybe 24, with limp blonde hair pulled into a messy bun and a faded coat 2 sizes too big. Her face bore the remnants of sleepless nights and something far older than her years. Grief nodded into every blink. She's here, Dr. Wexley assured her, leading the way. She's safe now. When Kelsey walked into the room and saw June in the bassinet, she broke, not with a scream, but with a collapse, as if her legs had given way under the weight of all the days she thought her child had died. She kissed the baby's forehead, whispering her name over and over. June? June? Oh, baby, my baby. The noise woke Scout. He rose to his feet, alert but not alarmed, watching the reunion with attentive eyes. Kelsey, lost in the moment with her daughter, didn't notice him at first. When she finally looked up and saw the German shepherd standing across the room, she froze. It's okay, Autumn said gently. This is Scout. He's the one who found June. Scout walked forward slowly, stopping a respectful distance from Kelsey and June. His tail gave a single cautious wag. He saved her? Kelsey asked, voice thick with emotion. Dug her out of the snow, kept her warm, led us to her, Mason explained. Never seen anything like it? Kelsey stared at Scout, then back at her baby. Tears streamed down her face as she reached out a trembling hand toward the dog. Thank you, she whispered. Oh my God, thank you. Scout stepped forward, sniffed her. Hand once, then sat. A silence fell over them. Long, full, perfect. He knew, Kelsey whispered, looking into Scout's eyes. Somehow he knew she was mine. Autumn felt her own eyes welling up. She exchanged a glance with Mason, wondering if she should. Tell Kelsey about the connection to Ethan. Not yet, she decided. There would be time for that story later. Dr. Wexley cleared her throat. We should let them rest. Kelsey, you can stay in room 3 tonight with June. There's a cot, and I'll be here all night if you need anything. As they prepared to leave, Scout remained where he was, watching June and Kelsey with unwavering attention. Scout, Autumn called softly. Come on, boy. But the dog didn't move. I think he's staying, Ivy said with a small smile. He's not done yet. Kelsey looked at the German Shepherd, then at Dr. Wexley. Is it okay if he stays, please? I'd feel safer, Dr. Wexley nodded. I think we can make an exception to the rules just this once. That night, as another light snow began to fall, Autumn stood at the clinic window, watching the flakes dance in the parking lot lights. Mason joined her, 2 cups of vending machine soup in his hands. Never thought I'd see Scout again, he said, passing her a cup. Part of me still can't believe it. You think we should tell Kelsey about Ethan? Autumn asked. About the connection. Mason considered this. Tomorrow, maybe? She's been through enough. Tonight, they sipped their soup in companionable silence. Through the partially open door to room 3, they could see Kelsey asleep on the cot, one hand stretched out to touch June's bassinet. Scout lay on the floor between them, head on his paws, but eyes open, ever vigilant. What happens now? Autumn wondered aloud. To Scout, I mean. Don't know, Mason admitted. He's been wild for 3 years. Doubt he'd adjust to a shelter. No, Autumn agreed. Not after everything he's been through. The snowfall had ended days ago, but the cold still lingered like a breath that refused to exhale. Beneath the silence of Red Elk's frostbitten hills, time moved not in hours but in memory. Autumn, Riley sat by the clinic window. The sky outside turned a pale amber as the sun set behind the Swan Range. In the next room, June's soft babbles echoed faintly, the sound of new life weaving its thread into a tapestry of sorrow and survival. Scout lay curled beneath the window bench, unmoving except for the occasional twitch of an ear. He had not left June's side since the reunion. Not when the mother arrived, not when the press came knocking, not even when Lavra Winslow offered to place him in a local shelter pending further assessment. He's not going anywhere, Autumn had said then, her voice low but steady. But now Autumn found herself at a crossroads. Scout had no official owner, no clear place to return. And though her home was small and her grief still thick, something inside her, some unlit corner, had begun to stir with the question, could she keep him? That afternoon, Autumn returned to the fire station where Ethan Blackwood had once worked. She brought Scout with her, though the dog walked slowly now, a faint limp still in his rear leg. His age showed more in daylight, grizzled fur, cloudy eyes, but nothing about him seemed diminished. If anything, the way he scanned every room before entering, paused at thresholds, and kept his flank toward the wall, those were habits formed in fire and never forgotten. Station 9 was a weather-worn building of steel and cinder block, trimmed with red paint that had faded to rust. Inside it smelled of ash, coffee, and old oil. Firefighters moved through the halls with the casual rhythm of familiarity. Radio chatter low, boots heavy, banter light. A man emerged from the office at the back. Late 50s, close-cropped hair, denim shirt tucked into fireproof trousers. He had the shoulders of a younger man, but a limp that matched Scout's in rhythm. His name was Captain Neil Bram, and his face froze when he saw the dog. Well, I'll be damned, he murmured, crouching slowly. Scout, the dog, walked forward, stopped a foot away, and sat. Autumn waited, watching the recognition bloom between them. He used to sit like that for Ethan, Neil said. Wouldn't come closer, unless given the word. He stood again, emotion coiled tight behind his eyes. You came to learn more? He asked Autumn. I came to see where Scout came from, she replied, and to ask about Ethan Blackwood. Neil led her down a hallway to a storage room near the back where boxes were stacked on high shelves labeled with years and call signs. He pulled one marked Blackwoody Ridge unit, He opened it, laid out the contents gently. A badge, a burned helmet, training records, and the original of the photograph they'd found in the forest. Ethan, with his arm looped around Scout, both staring straight into the lens with a look of mutual certainty. Scout was trained in rapid infant rescue, Neil explained. Used to sleep beside the cribs during drills. Ethan said the dog knew the sound of a newborn crying before any human ear caught it. Autumn looked at the file in silence. Then she said, he brought June to the fire line to where Ethan died. Neil didn't look surprised. Dogs like him don't forget purpose. They don't understand death the way we do, just absence. And when purpose disappears, they wait for it to return. I know Mason Sawyer worked with Ethan, Autumn said. What happened between them? Neil sighed, running a hand over his stubbled jaw. Good men, both of them, different approaches. Ethan was cautious, methodical. Mason was bold, instinctive. That day at the ridge, he trailed off, gathering his thoughts. The call came in about hikers trapped by the fire. Mason wanted to go in. From the north. Ethan disagreed, said the wind patterns were unpredictable, but time was running out. Mason gave the order, Autumn asked. He was team lead that day when Ethan went in and the wind shifted. Neil shook his head. Mason blamed himself. Transferred out before the investigation cleared him. Never came to the memorial service. Scout had been watching them with alert eyes. Now he moved to a corner of the room where old uniforms hung. He sat beneath one, looking up expectantly. That was Ethan's locker, Neil explained. Scout remembers. Autumn approached the locker, opened it gently. Inside, pushed to the back, was a small leather pouch. She removed it, feeling something solid inside. His grandfather's compass. Neil identified it. Ethan carried it everywhere. The brass compass was tarnished but intact. Autumn turned it over. Noting the initials Ebb etched on the back, she slipped it into her pocket, a piece of Ethan's story to share with his cousin. There's one more thing, Neil said, hesitating. Ethan had a journal always writing in it. After he died, his personal effects were supposed to go to family, but there was some confusion. I think it might still be in evidence. His family, you mean Kelsey Monroe? Autumn asked. Neil nodded, his cousin. They were close growing up, I understand. Fell out of touch when she moved to Missoula. Ethan mentioned she was expecting. Said he was looking forward to being an uncle of sorts. The pieces continued to align, a constellation of connection forming from seemingly random stars. Autumn thanked Neil, and as they prepared to leave, the captain knelt once more before Scout. You did good, boy, he said softly. Ethan would be proud. Scout leaned forward, resting his head briefly against Neil's shoulder, a gesture of acknowledgement, perhaps even gratitude before turning to follow Autumn out. The drive back to the clinic was quiet. Scout sat in the passenger seat, his gaze fixed on the passing landscape. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the snow-covered fields, turning the world to gold and blue. Autumn's mind raced. With all she'd learned, with the story taking shape. You never gave up, did you? She asked Scout, not expecting an answer. All this time, you've been watching over his family. The dog turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting a wisdom beyond words. For a moment, Autumn was reminded of Noah, her brother, who'd gone into an avalanche to save a stranger and never returned. She'd spent years trying to outrun that loss, to bury the guilt that she hadn't been there, hadn't stopped him. Yet here was Scout, who had transformed his loss into purpose, his grief into vigilance. Maybe that's what we're supposed to do, she murmured. Not forget, but find a way to carry it forward. When they arrived at the clinic, they found Mason waiting outside, pacing nervously. Something's happened, he said as Autumn approached. Kelsey recognized Scout's name when I mentioned it. She knows about Ethan. Inside, they found Kelsey sitting in the waiting area, June asleep in her arms. Her eyes were red, rimmed, but she had a calmness about her now. The peace that comes after a long-held breath is finally released. Mason told me about Ethan. She said when she saw Autumn, about Scout being his dog. I can't believe I didn't make the connection sooner. Scout moved to her side, sitting close enough that his shoulder pressed gently against her leg. Kelsey shifted June to one arm, using her free hand to stroke the dog's head. Ethan and I grew up together, she explained. Summers in Red Elk with our grandparents, we were like siblings. But after Gran died, I moved to Missoula. Got caught up in my own life. We lost touch, her voice caught. I didn't even know he died. Until months later. By then, I was pregnant with June, dealing with her father leaving. I was so wrapped up in my own problems, you couldn't have known, Autumn said gently. But Scout knew, Kelsey whispered, looking down at the dog with wonder. Somehow, he knew June was Ethan's family. That's why he protected her. June stirred in her mother's arms, making a small mooing sound. Scout's ears perked up instantly, his attention fixed on the baby with a protective intensity that seemed woven into his very being. I have something for you, Autumn said, reaching into her pocket for the compass. It was Ethan's. Kelsey took it with trembling fingers, tears welling fresh in her eyes. His grandfather gave him this when he was 10, she said. Taught him how to navigate in the woods. Ethan promised he'd teach me too, but I was always too busy with other things. She cradled the compass as if it were as precious as her child. Thank you for this, for everything. Dr. Wexley appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. June's discharge papers are ready, she announced. All vitals normal, no signs of lasting damage from exposure. It's nothing short of miraculous. Not a miracle, Mason said quietly. Scout, the doctor nodded, her professional demeanor softening as she looked at the German shepherd. In 30 years of medicine, I've never seen anything quite like this. Kelsey stood, adjusting June in her arms. I've been thinking, she said. I want to move back to Red Elk. There's nothing for us in Missoula anymore. And after all this, she glanced. Down at Scout, it feels right to come home? Do you have a place to stay? Autumn asked. My grandparents' old cabin is still in the family. Needs work, but it's a start. As they discussed arrangements, the clinic door burst open. A rush of cold air preceded Deputy Barrett, his face grave as he strode toward them. We've got a problem, he announced without preamble. Trish Warren wasn't in the car. The name hung in the air like frost. Kelsey's arms tightened protectively. Around June. What do you mean? Mason asked. They found her body. Barrett shook his head. DNA results just came back. The woman in the wreck was Teresa Miller, Warren's roommate. Similar height and build, but definitely not Warren. Then where is Trish? Autumn demanded. That's what we need to figure out, Barrett replied. Because her credit card was just used at a gas station 20 meters from here. The implications settled over the group like a shadow. If Trish Warren was alive, if she had deliberately taken June, she's coming back, Kelsey whispered, face draining of color. Oh God, she's coming for June. Scout was on his feet instantly, positioned between the door and Kelsey, a low growl building in his throat. We need to get you both to a secure location, Barrett said already on his radio. I'm calling for backup. My place, Autumn said decisively. It's isolated, defensible. No one would look for her there. Mason nodded in agreement. I'll drive, Barrett, you follow. As they hurried to prepare, gathering June's things and warm clothes, Scout never left Kelsey's side. His posture had changed. No longer the patient guardian, but a coiled spring, alert to every sound, every movement. This was the Scout of search and rescue missions of life and death situations. Within minutes, they were in Autumn's truck. Mason driving, Autumn in the passenger seat, Kelsey and June in the back with Scout pressed against them like a living shield. Barrett followed in his patrol car, lights off to avoid drawing attention. Why would Trish do this? Autumn asked as they sped through the darkening evening. What could she possibly want with June? Kelsey's voice was hollow with realization. Money. My grandmother's estate finally cleared probate last month. I inherited everything. The cabin, her savings. It's not millions, but in a place like this, she swallowed hard. Trish knew. I told her I was finally financially secure, that June and I would be okay. And she saw an opportunity. Mason finished grimly. The truck rounded a bend, headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. Autumn's cabin came into view, a small log structure nestled between snow-laden pines, windows dark and waiting. Home, but not yet a sanctuary. Stay in the truck until we clear the house, Barrett instructed as they pulled up, but before anyone could move, Scout's head snapped up, ears forward, body tense. A low warning growl rumbled from his chest. "What is it, boy?" Mason asked quietly. Scout's eyes were fixed on the cabin's dark windows. Through the silence of the winter evening came the faint sound of movement inside, a creak of floorboards, the soft thud of a misplaced step. Someone was already there? "Get down," Barrett whispered, drawing his weapon. "Mason, back the truck up slowly." No lights. Mason shifted into reverse, easing the vehicle backward with excruciating care. Each small crunch of snow beneath the tires sounded thunderous in the silence. "We need to get June away from here," Autumn said, reaching for her phone. "I'll call." "For backup?" "No service," Kelsey whispered, showing her own phone's empty signal bars. "We're too far out." Barrett slipped from his patrol car, crouching low as he approached the truck's window. "I'm going to check it out. You three take the baby and head back toward town." Scout came before he could finish. Scout leapt from the truck, landing silently in the snow. His hackles were raised, teeth bared in a silent snarl as he positioned himself between the cabin and the vehicle. "Scout!" Autumn hissed, but the dog paid no attention. His focus was absolute, every muscle taut with protective intent. A shadow moved across one of the cabin windows. Then the front door creaked open. "Hello?" called a woman's voice, falsely cheerful. "Is someone out there?" "I could use some help with my car." Barrett motioned for them to stay down. Autumn reached back, squeezing Kelsey's hand as the young mother curled protectively around June. "Police," Barrett announced, stepping into view with his gun raised. "Show yourself slowly, hands where I can see them." The figure in the doorway froze. For a moment no one moved. Then a flash of metal caught the fading light, and Barrett dove to the side as a gunshot cracked through the winter air. "Go!" Barrett shouted as he returned fire from behind his vehicle. "Get out of here now!" Mason slammed the truck into reverse, but the tires spun on the icy driveway. "We're stuck." Another shot pinged off the hood. Autumn made a split-second decision. "The trees," she said, pointing to the dense forest line just 30 yards away. "We can make it on foot. The darkness will cover us." Kelsey clutched June to her chest, the baby now wailing in fear. "I can't run in this snow with her." "I'll carry her," Autumn insisted. "Mason, you help Kelsey. We'll follow the creek bed. It leads to the main road eventually." As they prepared to move, Scout suddenly bolted toward the cabin, a blur of fur and purpose. The figure in the doorway fired again, the shot going wide as Scout launched himself forward. A woman's scream pierced the night, followed by the sound of a struggle. Barrett used the distraction to advance, shouting commands that were lost in the chaos. "Now," Autumn urged, throwing open the door. She took June from Kelsey's arms, cradling the infant inside her heavy coat. "Stay low. Move fast. Don't look back." They plunged into the snow, half running, half crawling toward the treeline. Behind them, the sounds of struggle continued. Growls, shouts, another gunshot. Autumn forced herself not to turn, focusing only on protecting the precious bundle against her chest. June had stopped crying, perhaps sensing the need for silence, her tiny face pressed into Autumn's neck. They reached the trees just as another shot rang out, this one followed by a yelp that turned Autumn's blood to ice. "Scout!" Kelsey gasped, stopping in her tracks. "Keep moving," Mason urged, practically carrying her forward. "We can't help him now." The forest closed around them, darkness absolute beneath the thick pines. Autumn led the way, moving as quickly as she dared through snow that reached Migfy in places. Her mind raced with calculations. How far to the road? How long before hypothermia became a threat to June? Whether Barrett or Scout had survived the confrontation at the cabin. After what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, they reached the frozen creek bed Autumn had mentioned. Its icy surface provided an easier path, though treacherously slick in the darkness. "This way," she whispered, adjusting June inside her coat. The baby remained unnervingly quiet, conserving her energy. "We can follow this all the way to the Miller property. They have a phone." They moved in tense silence, straining to hear any sounds of pursuit. The gunshots had stopped, leaving only the whisper of their own labored breathing and the occasional crack of ice beneath their feet. "Do you think Scout?" Kelsey couldn't finish the question. "He survived worse," Mason said, though. His voice lacked conviction. "That dog has 9 lives." Autumn wanted to believe it, but the memory of that pained yelp haunted each step. She had only just found Scout, only just begun to understand the depth of his loyalty and purpose. The thought of losing him now after everything was unbearable. June stirred against her chest, making a small sound of discomfort. Autumn checked her quickly, relieved to find her still warm, though her little face was pinched with cold. "We need to find shelter soon," she said. "June can't handle much more exposure." The creek bed widened, leading them into a small clearing, where moonlight silvered the snow. Too exposed, Autumn thought, veering back toward the trees. But as they reached the forest edge, a figure stepped out from behind a large pine, blocking their path. "That's far enough," said Trish Warren, her gun trained on Autumn. Blood streaked one side of her face and her breathing was ragged. "Give me the baby." Autumn instinctively turned, shielding June with her body. "No, I don't want to kill you," Trish said, though her unwavering aim suggested otherwise. "But I will. I've come too far to leave empty-handed." Mason moved slightly, positioning himself beside Autumn. "Think about what you're doing, Trish. Kidnapping, attempted murder. You'll never get away with this." A harsh laugh escaped her. "I already did." "Everyone thinks I'm dead, remember? All I need is the baby and the signed guardianship papers in Kelsey's purse, then I'm gone. New name, new state, and $500,000 richer once the estate sells." "You'll never get custody," Kelsey said, her voice stronger than Autumn expected. "No court would." "I don't need a court," Trish snapped. "Just your signature, and you're going to give it to me or I start shooting your friends, starting with her." She gestured with the gun toward Autumn and June. The standoff stretched, seconds expanding into small eternities. Autumn's mind raced. For options, for escape routes, for anything that might save June. She felt Mason tensing beside her, preparing to lunge despite the impossible odds. "Don't," she murmured to him. "June needs us alive." "Smart woman," Trish said. "Now, very carefully, hand over the baby." Autumn locked eyes with Kelsey, seeing the raw terror there, but also a flicker of something else. Determination, perhaps. A mother's resolve. Kelsey gave an almost imperceptible nod. "All right," Autumn said, slowly turning toward Trish. "Just don't hurt her." As she took a step forward, a sound cut through the night, a low, rumbling growl from the darkness behind Trish. The woman spun, firing blindly into the trees. The shot echoed, and in the fraction of silence that followed, Scout burst from the shadows like an avenging spirit. His fur was matted with blood, but his movements were precise, powerful. He hit Trish full force, driving her into the snow as the gun discharged once more into the night sky. Mason was moving instantly, racing forward to kick the weapon away. Autumn pulled Kelsey and June back toward the trees, putting distance between them and the struggle. Scout had Trish pinned, teeth bared inches from her throat, a growl vibrating through his entire body. The woman lay perfectly still, terror plain on her face. "Call him off," she pleaded. "Please, Scout," Mason commanded, his voice firm but gentle. "That's enough, boy. Hold." The dog didn't release his position, but the growling subsided. He remained poised above Trish, a living restraint, waiting for further instruction. In the distance, flashlight beams cut through the trees, accompanied by shouts. Barrett had found backup. "Over here," Mason called, waving his arms. "We need medical." Minutes later, the clearing was flooded with officers and first responders. Fish was handcuffed and led away, her face pale with shock and defeat. Barrett, sporting a nasty gash on his forehead but otherwise intact, approached them. "Followed the tracks from your cabin," he explained. "Called in everyone I could reach. You all okay?" "We're fine," Autumn said, though her voice shook slightly. "But Scout's hurt." The German shepherd had collapsed after Trish was secured, his energy seemingly depleted. Blood darkened his left shoulder where a bullet had grazed him, and his breathing was labored. "Get him to Dr. Wexley," Barrett ordered. "A nearby paramedic. Priority transport." As they prepared a makeshift stretcher for Scout, Kelsey knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face. "You saved us again," she whispered, pressing her forehead to his. "You brave, beautiful soul." Scout's tail thumped once against the snow, his eyes fixed on June, still securely wrapped in Autumn's coat. Even now, his first concern was the child. The journey back to civilization passed in a blur. Autumn rode in the ambulance with Scout, her hand resting gently on his uninjured shoulder. The dog drifted in and out of consciousness, age and injury taking their toll on his battle-worn body. At the clinic, Dr. Wexley was waiting, having cleared an examination room specifically for Scout. "Bring him straight in," she ordered, all business despite the unusual patient. Hours passed in tense silence. Autumn, Mason, Kelsey, and June waited in the small lobby, each lost in their own thoughts. Barrett came and went, gathering statements, providing updates on Trish's custody and the investigation. She confessed to everything he told them during one visit. Planned to take June, fake guardianship papers, sell the Monroe property, then disappear. The accident was real. She lost control on the ice. But when she realized the baby carrier had been thrown clear, she saw an opportunity. Let everyone think she died while she figured out her next move. But she didn't count on Scout finding June first, Mason said. Barrett shook his head, a hint of wonder in his expression. Nobody could have predicted that. It's like he was meant to. Kelsey finished softly, looking down at June, sleeping peacefully in her arms. Near dawn, Dr. Wexley emerged from the examination room, pulling off latex gloves with a sigh. Her face was drawn with fatigue, but carried a cautious optimism. "The bullet wound is superficial," she reported, "but Scout's suffering from exhaustion, malnutrition, and the early stages of hypothermia. He's been surviving on determination alone for too long." "Will he recover?" Autumn asked, her voice barely audible. "He's stabilized," Dr. Wexley said. "But he's an old dog who's been living rough for years. The next 24 hours will tell us more." "Can we see him?" Kelsey asked. The doctor nodded, leading them into the dim room where Scout lay on a padded table, and 4 drip attached to his 4 bandages wrapping his shoulder. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow but regular. Autumn approached slowly, placing a gentle hand on his head. "Hey, hero," she whispered. "You did it. Everyone's safe now." Scout's eyes fluttered open briefly, recognition flickering in their depths before exhaustion pulled him back under. "He needs rest," Dr. Wexley said softly. "You all do. Go home. I'll call if anything changes," but none of them left. They couldn't. Instead, they settled into the uncomfortable waiting room chairs, keeping vigil as the sun rose over the snow-covered mountains, casting long golden fingers through the clinic windows. June woke hungry, her cries breaking the morning stillness. As Kelsey fed her, Autumn found herself staring at the pair, struck by how close they had come to losing everything, how a single act of canine devotion had altered the course of so many lives. "I keep thinking about Ethan," Mason said quietly, joining her by the window. "How he'd be proud of what Scout's done." "Do you think he'd forgive you?" Autumn asked, the question gentle but direct. Mason was silent for a long moment. I don't know," he finally admitted. "I've never forgiven myself." "Maybe that's what Scout's been trying to show us," she suggested. "That there are better ways to honor the dead than holding on to guilt. Ways that save lives instead of imprisoning our own." A nurse appeared in the doorway, her expression grim. "Dr. Wexley needs you. Scout's taken a turn." They rushed to the examination room to find the German shepherd in distress, his breathing labored, body trembling with effort. Dr. Wexley worked methodically, adjusting medications, checking vital signs. "His heart is failing," she said without looking up. "The strain of everything he's been through, it's too much." "No," Kelsey whispered, clutching June tighter. "Please, no." Autumn moved to Scout's side, placing her hand over his heart as if she could will it to keep beating. "Come on, Scout," she urged. "Don't give up now." Mason joined her, his large hand coming to rest beside hers. "You did your job, buddy," he said, voice breaking. "Ethan would be so proud, so damn proud." Scout's eyes opened at the sound of Ethan's name, cloudy with pain, but somehow still alert. His gaze moved from Mason to Autumn, then settled on Kelsey. And June, a small whine escaped him, not of pain but of longing. "Bring June closer," Autumn suggested, understanding suddenly what Scout needed. Kelsey stepped forward, lowering June carefully until she was within Scout's line of sight. The baby gurgled, tiny hand reaching out toward the dog's muzzle. "See," Kelsey said through tears, "she's safe. You saved her, Scout. You brought her home." Something changed in Scout's eyes. Then a release, a peace. His breathing steadied slightly, the monitor showing a small but significant improvement in his heart rate. "Keep talking to him," Dr. Wexley encouraged, watching the readings with careful optimism. Through the rest of that day and into the night, they took turns sitting with Scout, as they told him stories about Ethan, about June's future, about the life that awaited him if he chose to stay. Autumn spoke of her cabin and the woods he could patrol. Mason reminisced about training days and firehouse pranks. Kelsey promised him a place of honor in her home, a permanent guardian for June. Gradually, impossibly, Scout began to rally. By the following morning, Dr. Wexley cautiously upgraded his condition from critical to stable. "I've never seen anything like it," she admitted. Medically speaking, he shouldn't have made it through the night. But sometimes she shook her head, a rare smile softening her features. Sometimes there are forces at work beyond what science can explain. As Scout continued to recover, news of his heroism spread through Red Elk and beyond. Local papers ran the story. Then national ones picked it up. "Hero Dog returns from the wild to save baby" became a headline that captured hearts across the country. Offers poured in. Donations for Scout's medical care, proposals for books and movies, even requests to breed him. Autumn and Kelsey fielded them all with firm but polite refusals. Scout wasn't a commodity to be exploited, he was family. 1 week after the confrontation in the woods, Scout was deemed well enough to leave the clinic. The question of where he would go had been settled. Without debate. He would split his time between Autumn's cabin and Kelsey's house, 2 homes united by one extraordinary dog. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Wexley handed Autumn a small bottle of medications twice daily with food. She instructed, "And he'll need follow-up visits. This old warrior has earned the best care we can give him." Autumn nodded, throat tight with emotion. "Thank you for saving him." "Oh, I didn't save him," Dr. Wexley replied with uncharacteristic gentleness. "Love did that. The kind that doesn't die, even when the heart that held it stops beating." Scout walked out of the clinic under his own power. His gait still stiff but determined. A small crowd had gathered outside. Firefighters from Station 9, locals who had followed the story, even Samuel Wicks standing at the edge of the group. Respectful nod his only acknowledgement. As Scout surveyed the gathered faces, his posture straightened, some echo of his former training asserting itself. For a moment, he looked younger, stronger, the search and rescue dog who had never failed a mission. Then his focus returned to June, secure in Kelsey's arms, and to Autumn standing beside them, his new pack, his ongoing purpose, ready to go. "Home, boy?" Autumn asked softly. Scout's tail wagged once decisively, and he stepped forward into whatever future awaited them all. Spring didn't arrive in Red Elk so much as it unfolded like old paper, creased and slow, thawing under the hesitant sun. The ice receded first from rooftops, then from fence posts, and finally from the winding creeks that traced the edges of town. Children began returning to school without snow boots, and daffodils poked their yellow crowns through the brittle grass. But for Autumn Riley, the first sign of spring was quieter. It was the sound of June's soft laughter carried through her. Open cabin window as Scout performed his morning inspection of the yard, nose to the ground, ears alert for any disturbance in his domain. It had been 3 months since that storm. 3 months since a dog had stepped into a road and refused to move. 3 months since silence became salvation. June was nearly 5 months old now, her cries stronger, her eyes alert, her personality emerging in flashes of stubbornness and joy. Scout rarely left her side. If June slept, he slept beside her crib. If she cried, he was up before anyone else, not agitated, but simply present, like the ghost of a promise fulfilled. In the months since his injury, the old German shepherd had regained much of his strength, though he would always carry the bullet scar and the slight stiffness in his hind quarters. Autumn had watched them grow together, the girl and the dog, two survivors joined by a moment neither would remember, but neither would forget. Kelsey Monroe had moved into the guest house behind Autumn's cabin. It was small, only 2 rooms, and a wood-burning stove, but she kept it tidy, filling the space with framed photos of her mother and rows of second-hand children's books she collected from local rummage sales. She'd taken a part-time job at the town library, just as she said she would. It paid little, but her smile, though still edged in grief, came more easily now. That morning, Autumn was stacking firewood outside when she heard the front screen door creak. Mason Sawyer stood there holding a foil-wrapped package in 2 thermoses. He looked the same as always, soft-eyed, stocky, a man who could calm a riot with a chuckle. "Figured you could use breakfast," he said, handing over one of the mugs. "Only if it's not from that gas station you call a diner," Autumn replied, the familiar banter comfortable between them now. "It's not. Ivy made it." Autumn raised an eyebrow. "Ivy cooks only when she's trying to distract herself from applying for permits to turn her barn into a raptor rehab center." They laughed, settling on the porch steps to watch Scout patrolling the clearing. June was wrapped in a quilt, lying on a blanket near the sun-drenched grass. Kelsey knelt beside her, tickling her stomach while the baby gurgled with delight. "She's changed a lot," Mason observed, watching the child. "They both have," Autumn said. "You too." Mason didn't answer at first, but after a moment he nodded. "I went back to the ridge yesterday. First time since, Autumn studied his profile, noting the absence of tension that had lived in his shoulders for so long. "How was it?" "Hard," he admitted, "but good. Left some flowers at the memorial. Said some things I should have said years ago to Ethan, to myself." Mason sipped his coffee, eyes following Scout as the dog circled back toward June. "Carrying guilt doesn't honor the dead. It just keeps you from really living." Words Autumn herself had suggested months earlier, now embraced as his own truth. Progress came in small circles, she thought, not straight lines. Their quiet moment was interrupted by the arrival of a sleek SUV winding up the driveway. Scout immediately positioned himself between the vehicle and June, old instincts still sharp. "Relax, it's just Colin," Mason said, recognizing the county-issued vehicle. Deputy Barrett stepped out, adjusting his uniform jacket. The winter's events had changed him, too. Less skeptical, more open to possibilities beyond his training manual. He'd become a regular visitor, initially checking on their safety, then eventually just checking in. "Morning," he called, approaching with a manila envelope in hand. "Got something you all might want to see." They gathered on the porch as Colin opened the envelope, revealing several official-looking documents. "Judge finally ruled on the Monroe estate," he explained. "Everything's cleared. The cabin, the trust fund, all of it officially transferred to Kelsey and June." Kelsey exhaled, bouncing June gently in her arms. "So it's really over. Trish can't touch any of it, even if she somehow got out." 20 years minimum, Colin confirmed. "And that's with good behavior, which I wouldn't count on. The DA's office said she's still making threats against all of you." Scout, who had been listening intently, moved closer to June, his body language clear. "Not on my watch." "There's something else," Colin continued, pulling a smaller envelope from inside his jacket. This was found among Ethan Blackwood's personal effects at the station. It was supposed to go to family, but got misfiled after the accident. "Captain Brem thought you should have it now." He handed the envelope to Kelsey. Inside was a handwritten letter. The paper slightly yellowed with age. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. "It's dated 3 days before the Ridge fire," she said, voice thick. "Dear Kels," she read aloud. I heard about the baby. Mom told me. I know things have been rough between us these past few years, but family is family. When you're ready, bring the little one up to Red Elk. Scout is amazing with kids. Best babysitter you'll ever find. Plus, I've got something important to ask you. Something about the future. Call me when you can. Love, EA tear splashed onto the paper. I never called. Kelsey whispered. I was going to, but I kept putting it off. And then he knew about June, Autumn said softly. He was already connecting to her even before Mason cleared his throat, emotion evident in his voice. What do you think he wanted to ask you? Kelsey carefully refolded the letter. I think he might have been planning to leave the fire service. He mentioned once about wanting to start a search and rescue training center. Sighed Red Elk needed one. The idea hung in the air. A dream cut short by fate, but somehow still resonant in the present. Scout had moved to sit at Kelsey's feet, his head tilted slightly as if listening to a voice only he could hear. You know, Mason said thoughtfully, there's still that old training facility on county land. Been empty since the budget cuts 3 years ago. Colin nodded. Place is solid. Just need someone with the right skills to run it. They weren't being subtle, but Autumn appreciated the gesture. Since the events of winter, she'd been restless, unsure of her path forward. The paramedic work sustained her, but didn't fulfill her the way mountain rescue once had before Noah's death made her retreat from risk. Are you suggesting I take on Ethan's dream? She asked, half smiling. I'm suggesting you might have one. Of your own worth pursuing, Mason replied. One that happens to align with his. The idea wasn't entirely new. Autumn had been turning possibilities over in her mind for weeks, ever since Scout's recovery had shown her that some wounds could heal given the right care and purpose. I'd need help, she said, testing the waters. Someone who knows fire procedures? Someone good with animals, someone with local connections. Mason grinned. Sounds like you've got a team sitting right here. Later that day, as afternoon sunlight spilled through the pines, Autumn found herself alone with Scout on the cabin porch. Kelsey had taken June for her checkup with Dr. Wexley, and Mason and Colleen had left to investigate the condition of the old training facility. What do you think, Scout? She asked, scratching behind his ears. Ready for a new mission? The German shepherd leaned into her touch, his eyes wise and knowing. Age had tempered his energy, but not his spirit, not his devotion to purpose. From the pocket of her jacket, Autumn withdrew a small object, Ethan's compass, which Kelsey had. Insisted she take. To find your way, Kelsey had said, since you helped me find mine. The brass still gleamed in places despite its tarnish. Autumn ran her thumb over the initials, thinking of the young firefighter she'd never met, but whose legacy had become intertwined with her own. I think I understand now, she said to Scout, though her words were meant for someone beyond them. Both. Why Noah went back into that avalanche, why Ethan went into the fire, why you never stopped searching. She took a deep breath. Some people, some souls just can't turn away when they're needed, even when it costs them everything. Scout rested his head on her knee, a gesture of solidarity, of shared understanding. The sound of tires on gravel announced Mason's return. He bounded up the porch steps, eyes bright with excitement. The place is perfect, he announced. Needs work, but the bones are good. Colin's already talking to the county commissioner about a long-term lease. They're practically giving it away. Autumn smiled at his enthusiasm. And what exactly would we do with this perfect place? The Blackwood Foundation, Mason said as if it were obvious. Search and rescue training for handlers and dogs specializing in infant and child recovery. His expression softened. Scout could help train the first class. Nobody knows the work better. At the sound of his name, Scout's ears perked up, his attention focused on Mason with unmistakable interest. You really think we could make it work? Autumn asked. I know we could. Mason sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Between your mountain rescue experience, my fire background, Ivy's animal expertise, and Colin's local pull, we've got everything we need except funding. Autumn pointed out about that. Mason pulled out his phone, showing her an email. Remember all those interview requests we turned down? The ones about Scout Story? This magazine wants to do a feature, and they're offering a donation to the charity. Of our choice. We don't have a charity yet. Mason grinned. But I bet we could incorporate as a non-profit by the end of the month, especially with a certain retired judge who happens to be Dr. Wexley's husband helping us with the paperwork. The pieces were falling into place with an ease that would have seemed suspicious to Autumn a year ago. Now it felt like alignment, like the natural flow of a stream finding its path after the thaw. There's one more thing, Mason said, his tone shifting to something more personal. I've been meaning to ask. That is, we've been spending a lot of time together these past months, and I thought maybe— Scout suddenly stood, alertness in every line of his body. A car was approaching. Not Kelsey's, but a sleek black sedan with rental plates. Autumn tensed, instinctively moving closer to Scout. Are we expecting someone? Mason asked, unmoving toward his phone. Before Autumn could answer, the car stopped and a tall man in his early 60s emerged. Distinguished-looking with salt and pepper hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Something about him struck Autumn as vaguely familiar, though she was certain they'd never met. Scout's reaction was unexpected. Rather than his usual protective stance, he moved to the edge of the porch, tail wagging slowly, head tilted in curiosity. Can we help you? Mason called, moving to stand beside Autumn. The man approached, stopping respectfully at the foot of the steps. I hope so, he said, his voice carrying a slight southern accent. My name is Robert Blackwood. Ethan was my son. The revelation hung in the air like suspended snowflakes. Autumn felt Mason stiffen beside her, saw Scout's tail wag with more certainty. Mr. Blackwood, she managed finally. I'm Autumn Riley. This is Mason Sawyer. I know who you are, Robert said gently. The whole country knows after that magazine piece last month. The miracle of Red Elk. That's why I'm here. His eyes moved to Scout, emotion evident in his weathered face. And this must be Scout after all this time. Scout descended the porch steps with careful dignity, approaching Ethan's father. Robert knelt, despite the obvious stiffness in his movements, and held out his hand. Scout sniffed at once, then pressed his head against the man's palm, accepting him instantly. He recognizes your scent. Ivy Lang's voice came from behind them. She had arrived unnoticed during the exchange. You must smell like Ethan, like family. Robert nodded, tears gathering in his eyes as he gently stroked Scout's head. We lost touch after Catherine, my wife, died. Ethan took it hard, buried himself in his work. I should have tried harder to reach him. By the time I heard about the fire, he swallowed hard. I've spent 3 years regretting the words we never said. Kelsey will want to meet you. Autumn said she and June should be back soon. June? Robert looked up confused. Ethan's cousin Kelsey has a daughter. Mason explained. Scout saved her during the blizzard. That's how this all started. Understanding dawned in Robert's eyes. The baby and the story that was Kelsey's child. He shook his head in wonder. Ethan adored Kelsey when they were growing up. He used to call her his little sister. The sound of another vehicle approaching drew their attention. Kelsey's old sedan pulled up beside Robert's rental, and she emerged with June in her arms, confusion evident on her face at the gathering on the porch. Kelsey, Robert called, his voice catching. Recognition flashed across her features, followed by disbelief. Uncle Robert. What followed was a reunion 3 years delayed, tears and embraces, introductions and explanations. June was passed from arm to arm, eventually settling with Robert, who cradled her with grandfatherly tenderness. Scout maintained a watchful presence, circling the group occasionally as if conducting a head count. As afternoon stretched into evening, they moved inside the cabin. Robert shared stories of Ethan's childhood, filling in gaps in the narrative. They had pieced together over the months. Kelsey showed him the letter, and he confirmed what she had suspected. Ethan had been planning to leave firefighting to start a new chapter focused on search and rescue. He talked about it in our last phone call. Robert revealed said he'd found his true calling training scout that's saving lives before they were in. Danger meant more than pulling people out after disaster struck. Mason exchanged a meaningful look with Autumn. That's exactly what we've been discussing. Starting a foundation in Ethan's name, a search and rescue training center focusing on handlers and dogs for infant recovery. Robert's expression brightened. He would have loved that, and I'd like to help if you'll let me. I retired last year, sold my construction company, and looking for something meaningful to invest in. He glanced down at June, sleeping now in his arms, something that honors what matters most. The conversation flowed into practical matters, property assessments, training methodologies, legal structures. Ideas that had been theoretical that morning began to solidify into concrete plans. Autumn found herself drafting notes, sketching potential layouts, her mind alive with possibilities. As night fell, casting the cabin into warm lamplight, Autumn stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The stars had emerged, brilliant against the black sky, and the air carried the first hint of spring's promised renewal. Scout joined her, his presence a comfort as familiar now as her own heartbeat. Together they stood in companionable silence, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. "We're really doing this," she said softly, taking a tragedy and building something new from it. Scout leaned against her leg, solid and real. From inside came the murmur of voices, laughter, the sound of connections being restored and new ones being forged. A family pieced together from broken parts, stronger at the mended places. Mason stepped out, draping a blanket over her shoulders. "Cold still has teeth," he said, joining their stargazing. "I don't mind it so much anymore," Autumn replied. "Reminds me where we started." He smiled, taking her hand in his. "Speaking of starting things, before we were interrupted earlier, I was trying to ask if you might consider having dinner with me sometime. Just the two of us." Autumn turned to face him. This man who had walked through fire and snow beside her, who understood loss and redemption as intimately as she did. "I'd like that," she said simply. Scout, ever attuned to the emotional currents around him, gave a soft woof of approval. The sound made them both laugh, breaking the moment's tension. "I think we have his blessing," Mason said. "Important endorsement," Autumn agreed. Scout's judgment has proven pretty reliable. They stood together in the cold spring night, hands linked, Scout at their feet, the cabin warm and full of life behind them. A constellation of their own making, points of light connected by invisible but unbreakable bonds. Robert appeared in the doorway, June awake again in his arms. "This little lady is asking for her guardian," he said, nodding toward Scout. The German shepherd rose immediately, padding back into the cabin to resume his eternal vigil. Some promises, Autumn thought, watching him go, transcended everything. Time, tragedy, even death itself. He'll never really stop, will he? Mason asked softly. "No," Autumn replied. "And neither will we." It wasn't a statement of obligation, but of purpose found, of meaning reclaimed. In Scout's unwavering devotion, they had all discovered something profound about the nature of love and loyalty, how it could stretch across impossible distances, how it could find its way home through blizzards and darkness, how it could save not just those it was meant for, but everyone it touched along the way. As they turned to rejoin the others, Autumn cast one last glance at the star-filled sky. Somewhere in that vastness, she liked to think, Noah and Ethan were looking down, satisfied that their work continued, that their spirits lived on in every life, saved in every search undertaken, in every lost soul found and brought safely home. 1 year later, when the first snow of winter dusted the mountains around Red Elk, the Blackwood Foundation for Search and Rescue Training celebrated its official opening. The renovated facility gleamed with fresh paint and purpose, its grounds alive with the sound of barking dogs and trainers calling commands. Autumn, Riley, stood on the newly built observation deck, watching the first class of handler dog teams navigate the training course below. 6 pairs moved through the complex terrain, climbing over fallen logs, searching abandoned vehicles, and working through scent exercises designed to mimic real-world rescue scenarios. At 44, Mason Sawyer had found his stride as lead instructor. moving with easy confidence among the trainees. The past year had softened the harder edges of his guilt, replacing them with the quiet authority of someone who had walked through fire and emerged wiser. The silver in his hair caught the morning light as he knelt beside a young woman struggling with her Labrador, demonstrating a hand signal with patient precision. "He's good with them," Ivy Lang commented, joining Autumn at the railing. "Natural." "Teacher." Autumn nodded, pride warming her chest despite the chill in the air. "They all are." Her gaze moved to where Samuel Wickses was leading a wilderness survival workshop. His decades of mountain knowledge now formalized into a curriculum that had already saved 2 lives during a backcountry rescue the previous month. In the main building, visible through large windows, Robert Blackwood conducted a fundraising tour for potential donors. At 63, he had embraced his role as the Foundation's primary benefactor and most passionate advocate, channeling his grief for Ethan into creating something that would save others from similar loss. The transformation of the abandoned county facility had been nothing short of remarkable. What began as a simple training center had evolved into a comprehensive rescue operation. Part educational institute, part active response team, part research facility developing new techniques for finding those lost in the wilderness. "Morning brief starts in 5, Colin Barrett called as he passed, arms full of topographical maps for the day's training exercise. The former deputy had surprised everyone by leaving law enforcement to become the Foundation's operations coordinator, claiming he'd found more satisfaction in prevention than punishment. Autumn made her way to the main hall where handlers and trainers gathered each morning to review objectives and assignments. The space hummed with purposeful energy, coffee brewing, equipment being checked, animated discussions about search patterns and weather conditions. Dr. Ellen Wexley, who had established a veterinary care annex at the Foundation, was examining a Belgian Malinois with a minor paw injury. Her precise movements and stern demeanor remained unchanged, though she now wore a Blackwood Foundation jacket instead of her medical scrubs. "All clear for light duty," she announced to the dog's handler. "No climbing today, but the scent work is fine." Autumn took her place at the front of the room, feeling the weight of expectant gazes. Leading had never come naturally to her. She'd always preferred action to administration. But this role, this purpose, had awakened something dormant inside her. "Good morning, everyone," she began. "Today marks exactly 1 year since our first informal training session, when we had nothing but an empty building and a whole lot of hope." Appreciative chuckles rippled through the room. "In that year, you've all contributed to 17 successful rescues, trained 12 certified teams, and established protocols now being adopted by services across 3 states. Pride shone in the faces before her. Some weathered veterans like herself, others fresh recruits drawn by the Foundation's growing reputation, all united by a shared mission that transcended individual glory. Today's agenda includes the winter survival course with Samuel, advanced terrain navigation with Colleen, and she paused, unable to suppress a smile, a very special demonstration from our founding member and senior training advisor. On cue, Scout entered the hall, moving with the dignified grace of his 11 years. Age had whitened his muzzle and slowed his gait, but his eyes remained bright with intelligence and purpose. Behind him walked Kelsey, holding June's hand as the toddler toddled alongside the German shepherd, her small fingers occasionally steadying herself against his patient form. A spontaneous round of applause erupted. Scout was more than a mascot to the Foundation. He was its heart, its origin story made flesh. The old dog acknowledged the welcome with a slight tail wag before settling into his customary position near the front of the room, June immediately sitting beside him. At 18 months, June Monroe was the unofficial princess of the Blackwood Foundation, with copper curls and her mother's determined chin. She had grown from the fragile infant rescued in a blizzard to a spirited toddler who considered every dog on the premises her personal friend. She wore tiny overalls with the Foundation's paw print logo and a miniature safety vest that matched the handlers. "Scout and June will be demonstrating our new child bonding protocol," Kelsey explained. her confidence a far cry from the shattered young mother who had arrived in Red Elk a year ago. She had discovered an unexpected talent for public relations, becoming the Foundation's most effective spokesperson. We found that rescue dogs form stronger search bonds when they have regular positive interactions with children of different ages. As the morning briefing concluded and teams dispersed to their assignments, Autumn felt a familiar presence at her side. Mason slipped his hand into hers, a simple gesture that still sent warmth through her chest. "Penny, for your thoughts," he said. "Just thinking about how far we've come," she replied. "Sometimes I can hardly believe it's real." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Oh, it's real. All right. The budget spreadsheets I was reviewing at midnight can confirm that." She laughed, leaning into his solid frame. Their relationship had developed with the same steady purpose that characterized their work. No grand gestures or dramatic declarations, just the gradual intertwining of two lives already bound by shared mission. Yet outside the snow had begun to fall more heavily, large flakes spiraling from a pearl-gray sky. Autumn watched it with none of the dread she once would have felt. Snow was no longer the enemy, no longer the silent tomb that had claimed her brother. It was simply another element to be respected, understood, navigated. The Madison County team arrives tomorrow. Mason reminded her they want to see the infant recovery simulation. Scout's specialty, Autumn nodded. Despite his age, the German Shepherd still participated in certain training exercises, particularly those involving infant rescue scenarios. He couldn't run the courses anymore, but his instincts for locating and protecting children remained undiminished. They walked together toward the training fields, passing the memorial garden, where a simple stone bore Ethan Blackwood's name alongside those of other rescue workers who had given their lives in service. Fresh flowers, Robert's daily ritual, brightened the snow-dusted marker. Nearby stood a smaller stone, added at Autumn's insistence, bearing Noah Riley's name. Her brother had never been a formal rescue worker, but his sacrifice had ultimately led her here to this place of healing and purpose. "I think they'd be proud," Mason said quietly, following her gaze. "Not just of this place, but of us, of who we've become." Before Autumn could respond, a commotion near the main gate caught their attention. A vehicle was arriving. Not one of the Foundation's, but a battered pickup truck with Colorado plates. It pulled to a hasty stop, and a man jumped out, desperation etched on his face. "I need help," he called, spotting their uniforms. "My daughter. She wandered off at our campsite. The rangers are searching, but someone at the gas station said, 'You people have special dogs. Dogs that can find children even in the snow.'" Autumn and Mason exchanged a single glance. Years of partnership condensing into wordless communication. Mason was already reaching for his radio as Autumn approached the man. "How long has she been missing?" she asked, professional calm masking the urgency beneath. "About 3 hours," the man replied, voice cracking. "She's only 4. She has her coat, but it's getting colder in the snow." "We'll find her," Autumn assured him with a certainty born of experience. "Tell me everything. Where you last saw her, what she's wearing, any places she might be drawn to." Within minutes, the Foundation's emergency response protocol was activated. Teams assembled in the main hall. Equipment was distributed and search zones were established based on the father's information. Scout, sensing the energy shift, was already at the door, body tense with readiness despite his age. Kelsey approached, with June in her arms. "He knows," she said, nodding toward Scout. "He always knows when a child is in danger." "He can't go out in this," Autumn said reluctantly. "The terrain's too rough. The weather's turning." "I know," Kelsey agreed. "But he can still help." She knelt, presenting June's small hat to Scout. "Like we practiced, boy, help them understand." Scout sniffed the hat carefully, then moved to the nearest search dog, a young German shepherd named Echo. He positioned himself beside the younger dog, demonstrating a searching posture they had all come to recognize as his teaching mode. Echo mimicked him immediately, her body language shifting subtly. "He's showing them how to search for children specifically," Mason observed. "The different indicators, the approach stance." Autumn watched in amazement as Scout moved from dog to dog, each time communicating something that transcended human training. Methods. It was as if he were passing on not just technique but wisdom, the accumulated knowledge of countless searches, successes, and failures. As the teams prepared to depart, Autumn knelt beside Scout. "Thank you, old friend," she whispered, pressing her forehead briefly to his. "We'll take it from here." The search lasted 4 hours, pushing through deteriorating weather and challenging terrain. Echo, Scout's star pupil, ultimately located the missing girl sheltered beneath a fallen tree, cold and frightened, but unharmed. When the rescue team carried her into base camp, her father collapsed in tears of relief, repeating, "Thank you," until the words became a prayer. Back at the foundation, Scout was waiting at the window as if he had been tracking their progress through some sense beyond human understanding. When the team returned with the rescued child, he rose stiffly to greet them, tail wagging with subdued satisfaction. That evening, as darkness settled over the mountains, Autumn found herself on the porch of her cabin, wrapped in a thick blanket against the growing cold. The rescue had stirred memories of Noah, of that first night finding June, of all the twisted paths that had led to this moment. Scout lay at her feet, his breathing, the steady rhythm that had become the soundtrack to her new life. Inside, the voices of their extended family filled the space with warmth. Mason preparing dinner, Kelsey reading a story to June, Robert, and Ivy, debating some fine point of training methodology. Mason joined her on the porch, placing a steaming mug in her hands. "Another life saved," he said, settling beside her. "Thanks to Scout's teaching," she replied. "It's like he's multiplying himself through every dog he trains." "Legacy," Mason nodded, "the best kind." The word hung between them, rich with meaning. Legacy wasn't just monuments or names on buildings. It was lives touched, lessons passed on, purposes discovered and fulfilled. "I've been thinking," Mason said after a comfortable silence, "about the future, about us." Autumn turned to him, reading the gentle question in his eyes. "Are you asking what I think you're asking, Sawyer?" His smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Depends on whether you're inclined to say yes." She leaned in, pressing her lips to his. "I think Scout would approve of making it official," she murmured against his mouth. "Is that a yes?" Mason asked, hope brightening his voice. "That's a yes," Autumn confirmed. "Though I should warn you on the package deal. Me, a very opinionated German shepherd, and an entire foundation of rescue dogs. Wouldn't have it any other way," he said, pulling her closer. From inside came the sound of June's delighted laughter, followed by Scout's answering, "Woof, life continuing, love expanding, purpose fulfilled." The snow fell gently around them, no longer a shroud, but a blanket covering the world in possibility. Autumn Riley, once defined by loss, now found herself defined by discovery, by the lives she had helped save, by the family she had found in the aftermath of tragedy, and by Scout, the extraordinary dog who had stood in the path of an ambulance one snowy night and changed everything. A German shepherd who had shown them all that sometimes the most profound acts of love were the simplest. Standing guard, leading the way, bringing the lost safely home. "To new beginnings," Mason said, raising his mug. "And faithful endings," Autumn added, thinking of all the circles that had closed to bring them here. Scout thumped his tail in agreement, his wise eyes reflecting the porch light like stars. Guardian, teacher, healer. His work continued through every life he touched, a legacy of devotion that would long outlive him. As the night deepened and the snow whispered against the windows, Autumn felt a peace that had once seemed impossible. The world was still full of darkness and danger, of people lost and searching. But now she knew with bone-deep certainty that there would always be those who stood ready in the storm, human and canine alike, guided by courage, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to bring everyone safely home. And sometimes when the need was greatest, there would be a scout, a silent sentinel in the snow, leading the way back to warmth and light and love. In the snow-covered mountains of Montana, a faithful German shepherd named Scout showed us what true devotion means. After losing his handler Ethan in a tragic fire, Scout never stopped searching, never stopped serving. When baby June was thrown from a car crash and buried in snow, it was Scout who found her, protected her, and led rescuers to her. Through his unwavering loyalty, this remarkable dog brought healing not just to June and her mother, but to Autumn Riley, a paramedic haunted by her own loss, and Mason Sawyer, a man carrying the weight of an impossible choice. Their story reminds us that it's never too late for second chances, that family can be found in the most unexpected places, and that our greatest purpose often emerges from our deepest pain. Like Scout, we all have the capacity to transform grief into service, to stand guard over what matters most, and to guide others home when they've lost their way. Has an animal ever changed your life in a profound way? Or when has someone's loyalty and dedication touched your heart when you needed it most? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear.